Hello and good day. Welcome to the Super Good Camping Podcast. My name is Pamela.
I'm Tim.
And we are from supergoodcamping.com. We are here because we're on a mission to inspire other families to enjoy camping adventures such as we have with our kids. We'd like to welcome back a wonderful couple from right here in Southern Ontario. They originally joined us last year to chat about their epic trip to hike the West Coast Trail. Today, they're going to share some of their highlights from their recent trip to the other side of the country. Please welcome back Alex and Jess, otherwise known as Tents and Timber, or I think it should be actually Timber and Tents.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, guys.
Thanks for coming back and yakking again. I couldn't, I briefly looked at how long ago. It was like we published it a year ago, June. Like I wouldn't have thought it was that long ago.
June 2022 is what you're
2022, yes. And who knows how long before that we actually recorded it. So it's nice to see you guys again.
Yeah, time flies.
Absolutely. Yeah, you two have been busy. We've seen lots of podcasts out from you. I think you just had your 100th episode or something.
We just did. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Weird. It's stunning to take that to be having done it that long. I feel like it.
100 episodes.
Yep. So you guys went east this year.
We did.
Where did you go? How long was it? Tell us all the things.
We actually went for 32 days in total.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah. So we feel pretty fortunate that we were able to have that luxury to take that much time off of our full-time jobs. But yeah, we really wanted to go east. We went when we were kids.
Yeah.
But we never went as far as Newfoundland. So the original goal was kind of maybe spend a week in PEI, a week in Nova Scotia, a week in New Brunswick, and maybe a week in Newfoundland. But once we started looking at the maps and everything, we're just like, and then all the things that we wanted to do, we were just like, no, we're just going to Newfoundland. There's way too many things to see and do in Newfoundland. So we spent, the bulk of our time over 3 weeks just in Newfoundland alone. So
That's my big bucket list item is to go to Newfoundland. That's high on the list of things I'd like to do. So inspire me. Tell me more.
It was lovely. We could have easily done 3 more weeks.
Oh, 100%.
No problem at all. We mainly focused on hiking and doing crazy excursions. We didn't spend a lot of time in the small towns. So definitely the next time that we go, we'll probably shift our priorities and hit some of the smaller towns.
Yeah, we figured, we're young and our legs and everything are still able. Let's do as much hiking and adventurous things as we absolutely can. And then, maybe a little bit later, we had some friends, and actually my parents this year flew into Newfoundland and did some bus trips and stuff with like big tourist groups. So we figured, way down the road, that's going to be our thing. And then we can see those small towns and all that stuff. But this time we did as much like backcountry-esque things as we could.
So where did you go hiking?
Where did we go hiking?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much everywhere. So we drove out there. So we took 2 days, almost 3 days just to get to Newfoundland. The ferry is a 7-hour ferry just in itself to get there.
So we started in southwestern Ontario, drove all the way to the far east of Nova Scotia, and then hopped on our 7-hour ferry to get to our final destination.
And then
did you have a nap on the ferry?
Oh yeah, we did. We took a few Gravol to help us sleep, just because we weren't really sure. We'd heard some like horror stories on like how rocky that boat can be. You're crossing the ocean.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had like super smooth. It was rainy. It was foggy, so we couldn't really see much. There was stories of people seeing whales and animals and stuff as you're sailing across, but we couldn't really see much. So we just slept the entire way across. We did a day ferry on the way there. And then on the way back, to try something different, we took the night ferry and actually got a cabin. So we actually had a bed where we were able to sleep. But it wasn't anything like an airplane, I guess. Our seats were much bigger, much wider. So it was very luxurious kind of thing.
Yeah, both options were fantastic. I think we enjoyed both. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, we ended in the southwest kind of corner of Newfoundland. And then there's not much really in the center of Newfoundland, I guess. So the main highway kind of arcs you across all the way to St. John's. So the goal was to drive all the way across, and then you can actually take a ferry from there all the way back to Nova Scotia, but that's a 17-hour ferry. So we figured we'd get more enjoyment
driving back.
So we drove all the way to the far side of Newfoundland and then ended up driving all the way back in that 3-week span.
Yeah.
How many hours roughly of driving was that?
So it takes about from like St. John's back to Port aux Basques, where the ferry is, to go back to Nova Scotia. It's about 9 hours of driving.
Yeah, so not horrible in the grand scheme of things. And I think living on Ontario too, we're so used to having to drive fairly far to get to some of the more wilderness locations, right? So we found the drive, and the drive is so beautiful. Just the landscape's incredible, the mountain ranges. It's just, our concern with this trip is that we're going to get burnt out of driving just with what we were taking on. But I never once was just like, oh my gosh, we have to have another long drive day every day. It was just like, bring it on. What are we going to see today? So we really enjoyed the whole thing.
Cool.
Yeah, in total, in the 32 days, we put over 8,000 kilometers on the car. So yeah, it was just a little bit of driving. But yeah, as Jess said, like, we don't have mountains really in Ontario. So driving through Newfoundland, like there's just mountains that drive around the next bend and there's some big mountains. So it was so enjoyable just driving, let alone actually exploring and getting out there. So.
And you're right along the ocean the whole time when you're driving?
Pretty much, except for kind of the middle portion, you're a little bit back from the ocean. But on either side, you're pretty much following the ocean. You're never too far from the ocean, really.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned not being able to see whales on the ferry, but did you see whales in the portions where you're driving or hiking? No?
Unfortunately not. No, we did not luck out weather-wise on this whole month-long adventure. I want to say it rained more than half the time. Yeah. I haven't fully added it up yet. But as an example, I know for sure the first 4 days it rained on us, which were our travel days, so it wasn't so bad. So, and then, when we actually made it to the far East Coast and we were doing some backpacking and stuff, it rained all 5 days of that hike. So,
we were a little soggy, but it was worth it.
But I think we lucked out, like, as far as much as it did rain, we definitely lucked out for the days that it did rain. So we did some bigger hikes, like a 17-kilometer hike in one day. And, that day we lucked out that it didn't rain. It rained the day before and the day after, but not that particular day. So I think even though we did get a lot of rain, it's not camping unless it's raining, right? So.
Well, and what month did you go, just for reference?
We went in August.
Pretty much the entire.
So pretty much from both long weekends.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of did the west side of the island first. So we went to, our destination was Gros Morne, and we spent a week in Gros Morne. And that was lovely. That was kind of what drew us to that province first, was just looking at some of the photos of Gros Morne. It's like, we have to get there.
Yeah. If you type in Newfoundland into Google, the first photo you're going to see is photos of Gros Morne and the fjords and stuff that they have there. And it's just absolutely stunning. So that's their big national park there. And yeah, we ended up spending 7 days there. We'd only planned to spend 6, but it was just so nice. We actually extended.
Where else did you camp?
So we stayed in 8 different campgrounds over the course of the whole month that we were away. And then that doesn't include camping on the actual East Coast Trail, because that was in different campsites as we kind of hiked along. And technically that's not really a campground. So we slept in our car the first night. Just because we weren't planning on it, but it was pouring rain and I didn't want to set the tent up in the pouring rain. So we just kind of kept driving, and then.
Yeah. And we were both feeling so great driving. We were just like, you know what? We're just going to go as far as we're comfortable going. And we ended up finding a really cute spot on iOverlander. There's an app for overlanding and more van lifers. So we used that app to try to find somewhere that was relatively good to stay. And yeah, that night worked out wonderful. But yeah, we started in Grossmore. Yep.
Yeah. So slept in the car, slept in Waikokama Provincial Park in Nova Scotia. And then we stayed in a small little provincial park in Newfoundland called JT Cheeseman Provincial Park. And then we got to Grossmorn, where we stayed for the 7 nights. And in Grossmorn, it's kind of like Algonquin, where there's like the different campgrounds in Algonquin, kind of along the main highway. That's the same thing in Grossmorn. So there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 different campgrounds there. So we stayed in 2 different ones and explored kind of the south end of Grossmorn, and then drove farther north and explored the north end, because the landscape is just so crazy. In the southern portion, they have what's called the tablelands, and it's just giant mountains, but they're like almost like an orangey red color.
Just bare.
And yeah, no trees, no grass, no nothing. And then on the north side, it's big lush forests of and mountains and stuff like that. So it was big kind of difference, driving from one side to the other, which was really neat. So we stayed in Grossmorn, and then we started our drive across to the other side of Newfoundland, and we stayed in some smaller little provincial parks. And then we got to the East Coast Trail, where we hiked that for 5 days. And then Jess has an old friend over there. So we stayed in at their place for a couple nights, kind of near St. John's, and got to hang out with them and explore the area. And then from there, we basically in St. John, we made the 8-9 hour drive all the way back to the ferry and took the ferry back across. So yeah, we stayed in quite a few different locations, but there's so many that we just kind of unfortunately had to, if we only stayed like one night there, like it was just like a tease. We were just like, oh, we just want to explore some more. Like
the little towns. Yeah. Like Twilling Gate and Bonavista. I can't wait to go back to those areas to explore more. And there's just great day hikes there as well. There's so much to see.
And how were the people, like everybody says, they're so so friendly and all that? So is that the real deal?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what we were really hoping to accomplish with having this longer time frame, was, not just to do all like the touristy things while we were there. We wanted to kind of get in
and meet people and talk to different communities and that. And everyone asks us like, oh, what was your favorite part? And obviously all the adventuring was great, but the people were way up there and probably the top things that we experienced on this trip. They were lovely and just, would give you the shirt off their back. It was just different pace than Ontario as well. And they were fantastic.
Well, and in terms of comparing your West Coast trail trip to your East Coast trail trip, any comparisons, anything different, anything better, worse?
Well,
it was completely different.
It's hard to compare the two.
Yeah.
So the West Coast Trail is an actual national park. So it's all well maintained. There's, lots of info about it and that type of stuff. Versus the East Coast Trail is actually a complete volunteer organization. It's a non-profit organization, or not-for-profit. And the trails aren't as well marked. There's a few designated campsites, but a lot of it is just kind of not really. So it's not as, well done and nice and as used as the West Coast Trail would be, I guess. And it's substantially longer.
Yes.
The West Coast Trail is roughly like 90 kilometers versus the East Coast Trail is 336 kilometers.
That's a little bit longer. Yep.
That's a little bit. So it's a bit longer. We did not do the whole trail because we would have been there. At minimum, I think it was like 12 days is the recommended, or
no, it's like 18.
Oh, 18.
But yeah.
So we did 50 kilometers of the over 300. but yeah, so it just, the biggest difference is that it is all 100% volunteer based. So they do all the maintenance, all the clearing, maintain the boardwalks and everything. So like kudos to them. Their map was actually really great. They have an organization that we ordered their maps from, so we could decide where we wanted to start the hike and end the hike. And it was great detail. So we were grateful for all the volunteers that put that together.
Ladders to go up and down like there was on the West Coast, or no?
We, in some spots, I'm sure that we wish there was some ladders.
Yep.
But no, for the most part, I don't think it was as like sheer cliffy that we were going up and down as we were hiking.
Well, there was just some spots that we had a substantial amount of rain and fog on this trip. And so we could have been against cliffs, but we just couldn't see them.
But we weren't like hiking them necessarily.
No, not hiking them. Yeah.
So yeah, no.
Hiking along them.
I'd say it was a lot more flat kind of walking on the East Coast Trail than the West Coast Trail. The West Coast Trail, you're just constantly up and down and up and down and up and down. And then walking out onto the beach. And you had like some good beach stretches where you're walking along the beach in the West Coast Trail. Versus we didn't really have that on the East Coast Trail. I'd say the landscape is a little more weather beaten from the ocean and the wind and everything. So the trees, and like right along the coast, there isn't a ton of big trees. So you're able to just kind of like walk some almost like grassy fields to a certain extent as you were walking. But generally we were always walking with like a 100-foot cliff to our right side down into the ocean. So yeah, it was pretty stunning.
Stunning.
When we could actually see and it wasn't foggy, it was a pretty stunning view for the majority of the hike.
And is it like the West Coast Trail where you need permits and to organize it going like you did with that, or no? It's just
that's a great question. Actually, no. As of right now, it's all completely free. So they really promote, obviously, the leave no trace attitude while you're out there. So they've broken the trail down into different sections based on their map. So each section of trail is labeled, and there's like trailheads, and it has pretty good descriptions of what's along the way. So before we found a Facebook group about the trail, and someone had actually kind of written down where the campsites were, and we could printed that off. And as we went along, we could kind of, however far we wanted to go each day, we could, pick where we were going to kind of find a place to stay. So for night 1, we found there was like a designated campsite, and night 2, there was a designated like actual East Coast Trail campsite. But after that, we were just kind of sleeping alongside the trail wherever we could find a flat spot.
Flat enough spot. And it did. The one night it did take some time to find anywhere that was appropriate to put our tent up. But it worked out.
So yeah, it was free, which was really, really neat. And there's parking spots kind of along the trail. So it's broken down to do it for like day hikers. So what a lot of people do is they'll section hike the trail, and they'll go and do one section a day, and then kind of make your way along, and then you could sleep in like a hotel or an Airbnb, which, would have been nice. And you can actually do that if you're doing like the entire thing. You actually, unlike the West Coast Trail, the East Coast Trail, you walk through a lot of small little coastal villages along the trail. So it gives you some more opportunity to, sleep in a hotel or an Airbnb and, get some supplies and food and stuff along the way, which was really nice. Unlike the West Coast Trail, where you're just kind of in a rainforest and you're on your own, the East Coast Trail, there's civilization almost on every pathway to a certain extent.
So you're not so remote or isolated.
Yeah.
Sounds like a kind of neat way to do it. Like, it's very different from anything else. It doesn't, even Killarney or whatever, if you're doing a 3-day or a 5-day, you're in until you come out, or until you double back, however that plays out. But yeah, neat. Just stop off, have a nice plush Airbnb, go do some grocery shopping,
take in some culture,
catch a movie.
Yeah,
that'd be neat. So how long did it take? There must have been epic planning. Like How long? How did you go about? What resources did you use?
For like the whole, for like the whole month,
your whole trip.
Yeah, this was like almost years of planning to a certain extent, and the biggest thing was actually getting our workplaces to allow us to have this much time off in a row.
Right.
So that was kind of like the big hinge in the plan.
Once we got that approval and we made all of our plans, then it was just like, okay, it's go time. Let's get everything booked. And it's like, okay, well, when can we book here and there? Cause it's so far out, but we couldn't book just like Algonquin, we can only book 5 months out or whatever. Right. So it was planning all that to make sure we didn't miss out. And Gross Morin being so iconic, the morning that we could book and it opened, I was literally just watching all of the campsites go book, 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 book. I had Alex on the phone like, I can't click on anything fast enough to get this thing booked. So it worked out, but it was like the panic of like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to camp there because it was so quick. But I think everyone was just very eager on that 7 a.m. Opening of the booking. And it did calm down after that. And there was availability, but just watching everything flicker, I was like, oh, shoot.
Sounds like booking Ontario Parks, boy.
Pretty much. Actually, overall, the ferry was probably the hardest one.
Oh, true.
The ferry books up very, very quickly. You almost have to book that, 6-8 months in advance just to even get there. So yeah, some of the campgrounds were a little bit easier, and then we didn't have to book anything for the East Coast Trail, so
and that gave us some flexibility too.
Mm-hmm.
So we had like an overarching plan of where we were going to be, but we didn't really plan out each day. It's like, okay, we're doing this today, this today, this today. It was kind of like these groups of days, we're going to try to do all these things. Because based on weather, it was going to be really weather dependent on what we could do in terms of our hikes and things like that. We're comfortable hiking in the rain to a certain extent, but we also want to enjoy the trails that we are going to be doing. So we did the mountain trail in Gross Morin. That's a 17-kilometer loop. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to really pick which day we're going to do that because we're climbing up a mountain. We want to enjoy it as much as we can and not have inclement weather to deal with.
So thankfully, Jess is like the Excel ninja, and we just like had each day kind of roughed out, and then like, if it's going to be nice, we can do these things. If it's not going to be nice, we can go to these museums or something. So it was tough. Like, we're so used to planning. You go on a canoe trip, and you're like, okay, I have to get to this lake today. I have to get to this lake tomorrow. We had to leave it a little bit more flexible, but there was some things that were like written in stone, like our ferry times and our time at Gross Morin. They were kind of like written in stone, and we knew we had to, make longer drives or push to get to those places in order to be able to see them for the timeframes that we'd had booked. But luckily with the East Coast Trail and a couple other items, we were a little bit more flexible and we could alter some things kind of as we went along. But yeah, there was years of planning that went into this, and then even day of planning, some things kind of changed at the last minute. So it was lots of maps, lots of notes, lots of
just
planning,
researching and Googling and trying to find best spots and things like that, or other people's trip reports of where's the best place to go, right? So it's just a lot of the normal research that we would do for any trip, but it was a long time.
Where did you dig up other people's trip reports?
For the East Coast Trail, the big one is actually the East Coast Trail Facebook group. There's a couple of them. There's some for just like day hikers, and then there's for the through hikers. So I think it's on the through hiking Facebook group that it talks about all the different places to camp. And I forget who had created it, but someone's made a phenomenal Excel spreadsheet with all the water sources, all the campsites, and different lookouts and stuff along the way. So we printed that out. We had it with us. And that one was more flexible as far as where we were going to be staying, because certain sections of the trail are a lot more strenuous and a lot more difficult. Mm-hmm. So we didn't know how far we'd actually be able to travel every single day. As an example, similar to the West Coast Trail, there were times where we would only travel 1 kilometer in an hour of hiking. Normally, like walking down a road, you can easily go 5 or 6 kilometers in an hour. But we were making zero headway. So I think the one day we only made it like 7 kilometers, and
it was a slow day.
Just because of the amount of rain and how like slippery and kind of dangerous the paths were. We just really took our time, and as Jess said, this was our vacation, so we weren't out there to like kill ourselves and set any new records or anything. We wanted to see and take in as much as we absolutely could. So
yeah, but we made up for it. We had 7 kilometers, 20 kilometers, so we made up for it on that day. We had some great weather, so we're just like, let's just keep on hiking. This is great. We got to the most easterly point of Canada, which is pretty special to see and stand on, and so that was a pretty wicked day to have that many kilometers underneath our boots.
Cool.
On Cape Spear, did you get to Cape Spear?
Yeah, so that's the most easterly point of Canada.
Point, yeah.
We started at Bay Bulls, I believe is the name of like the start of the section that we started on, and then we hiked for 3 days to Cape Spear. Got to see like the most easterly part of Canada, and then we continued another 2 days up from there, and then hopped off the trail.
And I had read that the trail is open year-round, so even in the winter you can hike the East Coast Trail.
Yeah, there's certain sections I probably wouldn't be hiking in the winter
with the snow.
The first section that we did, definitely I wouldn't do that in the winter. Just between all the rain and the cliffs, and but the last portion that we did closer to Cape Spear, I would think that would probably be manageable in the wintertime.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there were sections that were just, they marked them from moderate to strenuous, so it was the maps were really great in determining that, and the strenuous, they were accurate with that name. The moderate, you were pretty, for a hiker, like they were pretty good, but the strenuous, they did not lie. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned water sources. What kind of water sources? My tiny brain, because you're beside the ocean, salt water. So what about what was non-salt water sources? Like, I'm picturing, canoeing, filtering water and stuff like that. Was that what we were into?
Yeah. So that was actually one of the better parts for the sections that we did. The water was, for the most part, very, very clear. Mm-hmm. And as I said, we were hiking along the cliff edges. And then, so to my right, because we hiked north, so to my right was the ocean. And like generally it was like 100-foot, 200-foot drop off to the ocean. So anytime we stepped over a stream or a creek, that just shot over the edge of the cliff down hundreds of feet into the ocean. So it just made for some like insane epic waterfalls, like just falling hundreds of feet down a sheer cliff into the ocean. So those were our water sources. There was a lot of smaller little creeks that we just stepped over as we were walking each day. There, anywhere from 3 to 10 little creeks we'd hop over as we were going along. There was a couple bridges. So those were our water sources, and they were all relatively pretty clean for the sections that we were doing. We'd read that there are a couple sections where the water is very, tea colored with all the tannins, similar to what we're familiar with Algonquin. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, our water was always nice and clean, and we still filtered it, obviously. But yeah, that's where we got our water from.
And you took dehydrated food with you, or?
Yeah. So for this whole month-long trip, we knew we were going to be like camping and kind of being more secluded. So we did a lot of dehydrated meals. So we did like 25 dehydrated meals ourselves before we went.
And that's what we were planning to use too, even when we were in provincial and national parks, because we didn't know what the food situation was going to be. We heard that groceries were going to be quite expensive on the East Coast as well. So we just kind of had a meal plan, and we had set up a Rubbermaid bin with different levels of a pantry. So we had, our oatmeals, our dehydrated meals that we could do for lunch or dinner. So we kind of had a pretty big kitchen set, just so wherever the heck we ended up, we would always know we'd have a meal that we enjoyed with us.
But yeah, on the East Coast Trail, we kind of went between our own dehydrated meals and then some, store-bought dehydrated meals, which are just always so delicious.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever had a store-bought dehydrated meal. Just because I look at the price tag on them and go, oh, I don't think so.
Well, we had there's a manufacturer who makes them here in London, I believe, OTG.
Yep.
I think both maybe.
Or yes,
in that area,
somewhere in Ontario. And so we'd always wanted to try one of his, and so we brought one of those along. And we've always had some pretty good luck with the Alpine Air meals.
Yeah, they've always been delicious.
And for the most part, their serving sizes are like a serving size 2, so we can share one. So even if it has like a $13 price tag, we're splitting that, so it's $6 a person. So we won't do that all the time, but the convenience factor of just being able to boil water, pour it right into the bag, seal it up. Jess will use that as like a hot water bottle and, put it under her shirt and like keeps her warm. And, and then just eat right out of the bag. So no dishes, no mess. It's, super easy that way. So we'll do that on the harder days. So the days we hike longer or more exhausted and like you just get to camp, you just have enough energy to set the tent up and kind of lie down and then boil some water. Those are the days we'll do those. Versus sometimes our dehydrated meals will be, you'll create some mess and you'll have some dishes to do. So,
or they take more fuel too, sometimes too, if you need to let them simmer. So on the long haul hike trips, we'll mix it up just for ease a little bit. And we're always a bit mindful too of our comfort level with weights and what we want to carry on our back. So we went a lot lighter weight this hike and we were grateful for it. It completely was a game changer on the trail.
Absolutely.
And I know you guys are into fishing. So did you do any fishing while you're on the East Coast?
Oh, I definitely wanted to. But the fishing rules are a little trickier there. You need multiple licenses to go fishing. And for an out of province thing, it's more expensive. And then we thought about even just doing like a cod fishing trip. So like getting on someone's boat and having them take us out to go cod fishing. But it just didn't end up working into our schedules with the weather and the things we wanted to do. We kind of put it in our brains that's something, even if I'm, 80 years old and, I can't go hiking anymore, I could go stand on a fishing boat and go then. So we'll put that on the list for later. We were pretty lucky on our return trip home. We have some friends kind of back closer to home and in New Brunswick. And so we stopped with them for a couple of days and did some coastal fishing with them, where you don't need a license to fish in coastal waters. So like you're fishing kind of right in the ocean, essentially. So that was kind of cool. So we were able to do a little bit of fishing, but definitely not as much as we would have liked.
Mm-hmm. Did you catch anything?
Yeah, so we caught some flounder, which are kind of cool. I don't know if you've ever seen a flounder, but they're like the flat fish that rest right on the bottom, and then both their eyes are facing on one side of their body. So we found some of them and some mackerel, I believe, which are just like a little tiny torpedo, but bright blue and stuff, like colors we don't have in fish here in Ontario.
Yeah, very unique, a lot more vibrant.
And just pure muscle. You're swimming around in the ocean, you have all the tides. And so where we were fishing was very close to the Bay of Fundy, which if you're not familiar with the Bay of Fundy, that's where the largest tides are in the world. So twice a day, the tides are going in and out like hundreds and hundreds of feet. So that was kind of pretty interesting to wrap our brains around. We'd be standing on shore and you'd cast out, and like an hour later, you're 10 feet from the water. And, it was just, going out. So, and when we went, it was during a full moon. So the tides were even more extreme. So yeah, that made for just absolutely, you're constantly having to like chase the water because it just keeps going out farther and farther and farther and farther. So that was pretty cool. But because we were on the ocean, the wildlife is more abundant. So we never knew what we were going to catch. You're casting into the ocean. Are you going to catch a whale or a shark, or like what's going to be on your line? So the one thing that happened to us almost every day that we went fishing is we're fishing and we catch one or two fish, and then all of a sudden a seal or a sea lion or something would swim into our little bay, and then there's no more fish. They all left because the seal chased them away. So that was kind of a bummer, but at the same time it was super cool to like see like sea lions and big marine wildlife swimming around, and they were chasing the fish away, so we didn't catch anybody, but we got to see some wildlife. So
that's an okay trade-off.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know what. So fine. There's your East Coast, but along the drive, were there any Bay of Fundy? Were there any really cool things that will be a memory you're going to hang on till you're our age?
Well, definitely Gross Mourne. I'd say it was the most mountainous. And again, because we don't really have mountains where we are right now, there was one section where you're just driving. I think it was like an hour drive along, and you were going up and down so much, like your ears were popping like constantly. So like that's how much elevation you were like changing in that hour. Yeah. So that was a really cool section that we got to drive.
I think Gross Mourne in general is just going to stick out. And we were able to get so their backcountry campsites they call them primitive campsites. And you can only book them, I think it was the day of that you wanted to camp. So much different than what we're used to. So when we were booking Gross Mourne, I'm like, I want to book backcountry. And it was only, you have to show up and book it in person. So much different than what we're used to.
Yep.
But that backcountry campsite in Gross Mourne was one of my favorite nights there. I think it was just fantastic. It was right on the coast. We had a herd of sheep visit us on the coast right there. We ended up having dinner with them because they were quite happy to graze there. So being able to have that experience was really high on my list of just awesome adventures.
But as far as driving, I'd say the second best was the Twillingate area, which is famous for like icebergs, obviously a little bit earlier than August in the season. But just the landscapes there, like it definitely reminds you of something like you'd experience in Europe with like the cliffs down into the ocean and the foggy little fishing villages. That place we wish we could have spent more time in and explored some more of, because there was some great like hiking trails there, just, even short ones. So yeah, that place we could have just driven around through those little towns and villages all day long.
Yep.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Any epic trips planned, or do you want to disclose that information?
For like next year, you're talking about?
Next whenever.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get a winter. I don't really know what Southern Ontario is going to bring for us this year. Ideally, we would just do some ice fishing trips around here, but if it's anything like last year, we might not get that much ice. So, for next year, we haven't really sat down. We're still literally going through all the footage and the amount of pictures and videos and stuff that we took from our East Coast trip. We're still kind of trying to collaborate that all together. So we haven't put too much thought into next year yet. But in order to go to the national parks in Newfoundland that we went to, like Gross Mourne, we did have to buy a national parks pass. So that's good for 1 year. So there's the possibility of visiting maybe a national park in Ontario. We talked about that for 2024 before our pass expires. But yeah, don't really know.
Cool.
Open to suggestions.
I was going to say open suggestions. Yeah. What do you guys have planned?
Surprisingly.
So when we camp, it's car camping.
Right.
So I don't know. That's generally where do you want to go, hun? Okay, I'll book it. I'll figure something out. As far as backcountry, because it's with our eldest, is what I usually do. Where it has recently sort of come to my mind that I only backcountry camp with him. Like I don't do anything with anybody else. So we had a friend come on our fall trip, and that was for me, it was a mind blowing. It's like, whoa, somebody else on the trip. How cool is that? So it was because it was really enjoyable. Just the weird dynamic of having that third person. I started planning to do maybe a 6 or an 8 person trip to somewhere like Killarney, or somewhere in that realm of the world next summer. Try to see if we can snag 2 sites sort of close-ish together and do something like that.
And there might be a winter camping thing coming.
Oh, there might be a winter camping thing.
Oh, nice.
We got. It's very early planning still, but talking with Chris from Driftwood Paddle, they do a winter, like set up a hot tent and all that sort of jazz.
Very cool.
And the kids, the cool kids, Cool Quest, they are looking to potentially come up. So we're trying to see if we can jam a bunch of that together in and around the same time as the Outdoor Adventure Show, and see if we can't just make it be a week of awesomeness of somehow.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's very early planning, so I'm sure I'll trip over something at some point. But yeah, I think that'll be all right.
Yeah, I think I like just missed you. I believe you went to the Wildlands this year.
Yes, you were the week after or something. You and Cohen, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. We
that was neat.
That was a different experience. I've never done what do they call that? Non-operating. So Thomas and I were. I don't know. We were a ways north and figured we'd paddle down and pick up a site closer down to Head Lake, hang out there for another day, and then bail out early on the Sunday morning. We came down. There was nothing. We never saw a site that was open, and we paddled around for hours. So we just kept going and ended up having to bail out a day early because it hadn't occurred to me that it was Saturday, and it was beautiful. Towards the end of the season, and it's like, shoot. So I'll be planning that differently next time.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky. Like we did on Monday to a Friday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there was nobody. As we were leaving, it was just like one canoe after another was passing us going in the other direction. I'm like, well, I think we timed this quite well. I didn't really know what to expect. That was my first time going there too, to a non-operating park. And yeah, the weekends are very, very busy.
Yep. And it's weird to see boat traffic too. Like, I don't know. There's a couple of times I've run into it in the Kawartha Highlands and in Algonquin, but just tiny little boats. These are like big ass boats. It's like, wow. I don't know. It messes with my brain. I want to see people power moving boats.
Right. Yeah, and that's why we're such big fans of Algonquin, where there's only like a handful of lakes that actually allow motorized boats, and then even then, those motors have to be a certain size. So
yeah, like 5 horse, or I think they go up to 9 at some point. But
right,
I'm kind of okay with that. But these were like big. Oh.
Yeah,
weird.
That's it for us for today. Thank you so much to our special guests, Tencent Timber or Alex and Jess. Please do check them out. They're on YouTube, Instagram, all the things.
I think they have like 80 something videos up on YouTube now. Because I remember we figured out the number the last time you were on, and it was a much smaller number. So way to put that content out.
Good job.
Yeah, there'll be lots more coming too with our East Coast adventure. We haven't even fully started posting that on YouTube.
It sounds like it would be epic and beautiful. So yeah, you definitely want to check that out.
Really looking forward to that.
and check us out too. We're on YouTube also. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and if you'd like to reach out to us, we love to hear from you. Our email address is hi@supergoodcamping.com. That's hi@supergoodcamping.com. Or you can just check us out on our website, and we will talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye. Cool. Right on. That man. That I have a friend that was in Newfoundland for, I don't know. I think it was about 6 months, 8 months, something like that. And he sent back pictures of the Gross Morin, and it was just like, holy shit. I thought, because it's like being out in Jasper or whatever. You get up and you get the picturesque mountains with the blue lake in the middle, but everybody takes that shot. So I always assumed the pictures that we saw were from that one iconic place. And he's like, no. And then I hiked for a day, and then I took pictures over here. It's it's so amazing everywhere. Cool.
Yeah.
Highly recommend. And national parks too were fantastic.
Oh,
In
comparison to our
man.
provincial parks, I don't know if you've ever been to a national park.
Nope.
But the level of cleanliness and the facilities were just, it didn't even compare to.
They were top notch.
Our provincial parks.
So all the national parks in Grossmoron had like communal rooms. So it's like this, all the washrooms and everything were attached, but they had a big kitchen area, so big stainless steel sinks that you could use to wash all your dishes. There was a wood burning stove, picnic tables, all in this area, this building. And it was a game changer to be able, especially when we were on the road for so long, it's like to really do dishes good, a place to dry off when we get warm. It was, national parks were fantastic.
There was 2 national parks, Grossmoron and Terra Nova. We did stay in provincial parks, which would be very similar to our provincial parks.
Yeah.
But the Grossmoron or the national parks get different funding, so their facilities were amazing.
Yeah, they were wonderful.
Cool. I know that obviously it's different funding here too between the provincial and the national, but I don't remember reading anything like that communal room sort of deal. Like I don't.
Well, I think they were recently renovated.
He said 6 years ago they redid some of them in the
long ago
in Terra Nova. I believe that's what he said there. But.
Okay. Yeah, lovely. Highly recommend.
Yeah, that's on the bucket
You guys would love it.
Yeah, it was great. Like we car camped the majority of the time.
Yeah, except for the East Coast and one night in Grossmoron, we were car camping the whole time.
So even the car camping itself, like I have one photo where my tent's set up and, I have a photo looking out over the tent and in front of me, it's just big mountains. So like even the car camping, you get the full experience of Grossmoron, which is awesome too.
Cool.
All right, where am I going?
I can't put together 32 days in a row of not being at work.
I can't either.
How did you pull that off? Like how did you blackmail your bosses or?
The funny thing is, and I got this question a lot. We both did.
Yeah.
We got lots of different feedback for taking this much time off. But so many people were like, "Oh, my boss would never allow me to do this. I'd never be able to do that." And so ended up just being like, "Have you ever asked?" And
or do you really want to too? Right. So
honestly, I thought we both kind of thought that too, that it was going to be difficult to take that much time off work. And we asked, and they both said, "Yeah, no problem." And we were kind of both like,
"We'll make it work." And it's like I was pretty amped up to ask and have the conversations, and they both ended up being really positive. And I am an organizer at heart, so I had all things really laid out. And I think for both of us, it went very smoothly. So it was a really positive experience. So we're very fortunate to have such a great experience with that.
That's excellent. Yeah, I would just assume right out of the gate that I'd have to line up all the positives in order to convince them that no, really, this is going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we did too. We had things lined up for coverage and everything before we left. So that definitely helped and made the decision easier. But it could also be a great retirement trip,
Oh, man.
As soon as you retire, take off and...
It's going to be way in the future.
As old as we are,
it's
not going to happen soon.
Well, you never know. Time flies faster than you think. And, we're both amazed at how many, when you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been at my company for this many years already. It just feels like I've been there 3 years. So unfortunately, time does fly quite quickly. So we were feeling that and knowing that, when else in our lives are we going to be able to go and do these types of things when our bodies are still allowing us to go and do these types of adventurous things? We're like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be. We have to go and do these now. So we made it possible for ourselves and went and did it.